All right. Here we are. Tuesday night. Show's almost, we're getting ready. All right. Are we live? Are we doing it? Is this the thing? Are we here? Are we here now? Is it happening? Wow. Okay. Well, hey. Hello, Boozeketeers and burgeoning Boozeketeers, and those who don't even know you're Boozeketeers yet because you just stumbled upon this show thinking, "Is this something I want to watch?" And you probably don't, but what the heck, you're here. Why not? Hey, so I'm Tiki King, and we're here with another episode of Cocktales with Tiki King. Here on Tuesday night, I was just realizing, getting ready for the show. I don't even know. I've totally lost track of what episode this is. I believe we're somewhere in the 200 somethings. But I suppose I should get back on track and announce this is episode such and such. But I really don't know. We kind of lost track a while back. Sadly, our YouTube channel is not updated with all of the episodes going all the way back. But we're here right now, and hopefully you're here right now with us. And if you read the preamble, if you read the Facebook post, then you have your favorite cocktail in hand. I don't have my favorite cocktail in hand, but I do have a cocktail in hand, and I have one that's that will the significance of which will come to you. I'll get into that. But what I'm drinking currently is basically a Singapore Sling, and I'll tell you why in a bit. So tonight's show, we do a lot of different things here on the show. Sometimes I make drinks. Sometimes I just talk about drinks. Sometimes I'm just drunk. You never know. It's a crapshoot as far as what you're going to get when you tune in to the Cocktales of the Tiki King program. That's the thing, is it's not about Cocktales of the Tiki King. It's just cocktails. We're here. You're my friends. We're just here. We're hanging out together. And I talk, and I'm guessing you listen. I don't know. Some people may turn the sound down and just say rude things. I don't know. That's what I'd probably do. So what is tonight's show? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, tonight's show is about what is all this nonsense, and where did it start, and what's the deal? Where did it come from? Where has it gone? Where has it been? Where has it been going all of this time? Well, that's the thing is I'm going to tell you a little story about Tiki King. I'm going to tell you a little story about where that comes from and why that's me and why we're here tonight. So the Tiki King saga goes way back before Tiki King. I don't really know exactly where it started, but I have some hints about some things that happened that planted seeds in my childhood. The earliest one that I can remember was probably around I'm going to say 1966, when I was a mere baby. My uncle was a surfer, and he gave my dad as a gift a tiki, and not just any tiki. It was a 3-foot tall stone tiki. I don't know where he got it. I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it went. But what I do know is that in my youth, it sat next to the playhouse underneath a big tree. And I remember I remember thinking, this means something. And I didn't know what, because I was like all of 3 years old. But I remember it seemed important. And I think it was. Because then later in life, as I started growing up, I found myself mysteriously drawn to the totems of exotic, the exotic totems and whatnot. And I can even remember, like in 3rd grade, my mom gifted me a very tiny little tiki that I carried with me all the time because in my 3rd grade mind, I decided that it was bad luck to lose it, but it was bad luck to have it. And so I was like in this strange limbo of that I had to keep it safe, but that I shouldn't have it to begin with. And it was this weird thing. But there was a tiki there, It was there. And then, of course, I'm a child of the 60s. Brady Bunch, Taboo. Come on. Who has not seen the Brady Bunch episode? If you're watching this show, you've probably seen it, or you've at least heard of it. Thus, the upshot of the Brady Bunch, if you somehow know nothing about it, well, here's the deal. The Brady Bunch, they go to Hawaii, and they find a tiki, and there's all sorts of mayhem ensues. And in the end, they take it back to the tiki caves, where there's one of our favorites, Vincent Price, is hanging out with the tikis, talking to them, because he's been living in a cave and he doesn't have any other friends. But anyway, so that was one of those things that impressions. It made impressions. And I grew up. I moved up into the mountains when I was probably like 7 years old. And one of the things back then is that when you lived in the mountains, you had a pocket knife. And what's in the mountains? Sticks everywhere. So I was constantly carving little things. And one of the things, I'd carve little guys, little tiki guys. They were very crude. It was mostly just, like eyes, nose, slit for a mouth. But so that was like one of those things that just was sort of there. It wasn't, at that time, it wasn't, it hadn't blossomed yet. It wasn't important, but it seemed like something I should do because, But anyway, so we're gonna take it and go further in. We're gonna sidestep a lot of my like early childhood because there was a lot of weird stuff, but nothing as weird as what would happen later. So we're gonna flash forward to let's go in 10. So six. Let's go to 86. One of the things that I used to go on vacation up to where my mother lived at the time, which was way up in the mountains, and there was nothing around. And one of the things is that because there was nothing to do, you relaxed. So I spent a lot of time up there, basically in a hammock, drinking beer and doing what? Carving sticks. And what was I carving? You got it. I carved little tikis because, and here's the thing, that at the time, I found it amusing to carve little tikis and leave them all over my mom's house for her to find. They would be in coffee cups and in nooks and crannies and in the blender and where any place that, that she wouldn't expect one to be just because, like I said, it amused me to do so. So, I remember at one point my sister was just like, hey, can you carve me some tikis? And so I did. I actually carved her a whole set of these tikis, and I made up names for them, and I made up their provenance and what they did and what their powers were and all this stuff. And like I said, that was around like 1986, I think, that I did that. But shortly after that, I ended up moving to San Francisco. And when I lived in San Francisco, I often would I would go to the Goodwill there a lot, and I would like look for cool stuff. And one of the things that one day caught my eye was a tiki mug. And I remember it was I believe the Islands, and it was a moai. It was a black ceramic moai. And at the time, I wasn't. It's like I wasn't collecting tiki mugs or anything like that. But at the time, I was like, you know what? I should buy. I need that. I should buy it and just have it in my. At the time, when I lived in San Francisco, I was like, well, I could just put it on the deck or whatever. It's like it wasn't a drinking vessel as much as it was some sort of weird icon. So I bought that one. I think it was a quarter. I think I bought that one for a quarter. And then that suddenly it locked something in, because then every time I went to the Goodwill or to a thrift shop, I would look. I was like, oh, I wonder if there's any of those mugs, and there was. It's now it's kind of sad because, that was like 1986, 87, somewhere around there. And there really was the Tiki revival may have been happening, but it wasn't, there was nobody talking to each other. There was no internet. There was no way of communicating, really. There may have been, like, weird, obscure fanzines at the time, but nobody knew about, it's like, fanzines, back then, it's like you would hear about them from a friend. But if your friends weren't into the same things you were, it's like, who is going to hear about tiki stuff? Anyway, so that was like 80, 86, 87, somewhere around there. I started collecting tiki mugs because they were cheap, first of all. Like I said, a quarter. And they were weird. And there was a ton of them. I mean, literally, back then, I would go into the Goodwill, and there'd be like 8 tiki mugs, and I'd go, I don't know. That one's not really a tiki. I don't know. That one's not a full body. It's like, now I think back then I was so picky, and there was so much. And it's like now, now things, but then I'll get into it later. So I started collecting tiki mugs, and that like started a whole nother thing. Living in San Francisco, I was in at the time I was actually really into Vespa scooters. Still am, but at the time I was a mechanic, worked on scooters. I was in a scooter club, and a friend of mine, Dave Dubner, in case you're watching the show, Dave. He used to come by sometimes the shop, and he'd like, hey, want to go out to Tiki Bob's, get a sneaky tiki, which we couldn't because Tiki Bob's closed, but he was like, he apparently grew up in the tiki scene, not tiki scene, but in a scene of people who went to tiki bars, because his dad went to it. They went to Trader Vic's all the time and stuff. But I told him, I was like, I found these tiki mugs. This is really cool. And he said, well, there's this bar out in the avenues that's a tiki bar. We should go to it. And I was like, a tiki? What do you mean tiki bar? What does that even mean? Because at the time I really didn't know. Like I said, I'd buy these mugs. They'd have strange names on them. I didn't know what that was all about. I mean, I was like, somewhere, Trader Dick's Nugget Casino. And I thought, okay, well, it's some kind of weird advertising thing. I didn't realize that there was this whole history. I really didn't. It was like, it was this thing. And so one day Dave was like, hey, we got to go to Trader Sam's. Got to go to Trader Sam's. And so Trader Sam's, if you don't know, Trader Sam's is a dive bar out on Geary, 26th and Geary, if memory serves. And it was a tiki. It is actually, as far as I know, it is the oldest tiki bar in the U.S. And it wasn't actually even a tiki bar to begin with. It was just a bar that was themed with exotic islands and such. When you went in, there was booths. There was like a horseshoe bar, and there were booths all around, and all the booths were made out of bamboo and had floral print cushions, and all the booths were named. And there was like, Hilo and Tahiti, and like, so I'm guessing that was probably originally to help the waitresses know where they were serving drinks. But I was like, whoa, this is crazy, And we went in, and they had all these drinks. It was like, I'd been going to bars for years, and it's like you go in, you get beer, or you get whiskey, or you get, it's like, but in there they had these strange drinks. They had these things, Singapore Sling. They had Beachcomber's Treat. They had all these. They had like the menu didn't say what was in the drinks. The menu was like, this. They hand you the menu, and it had the name of the drink, and then usually some sort of warning. It was like, it would say Singapore Sling. You'll need a sling after 2 of these. So it was like, I was like, you'd drink them and decide if you liked them or not. But I was like, whoa, what is this all about? And so then the next time we went, here we go. The next time we went, I carved a little tiki necklace to wear because I was like, this whole tiki bar thing, And so I carved a necklace to wear and carved an extra one. And when we got there and the waitress took our order, I gave it to her. And she was so excited. And it was like, she was, oh my God, this is fantastic. And so we were very well taken care of that night. So all of a sudden I went, well, wait a minute. I started thinking, okay, I'm poor. This is back, like I said, I was living in San Francisco and was a punk rocker and Messenger and Scooterits and all kinds of stuff. And but the money was not exactly flowing. But I realized that if I brought tiki necklaces to the waitresses, that, you know, there every now and then a drink was on the house and we got treated well. So every time we went there from then on out, I always brought tiki necklaces. And then, of course, I had friends who were like, hey, can you make me one of those necklaces? And I was like, I guess, sure, you know. So then, you know, it was like the weekend had come around and I was like, I got to carve like 3 necklaces because we're going to Trader Sam's. And this was still before anything was really happening. And then I found out about the Tonga Room in San Francisco, which was a whole nother thing. That, if you've ever been to the Tonga Room, it rains every half hour. There's huts around, and there's like this pool, and there's parts of ships, and it's crazy. But once again, I was kind of poor, so one of the things that was good was, I believe back then, if you ordered a drink, you could get the buffet for like $5, and it was you know, wontons and pot stickers and egg rolls and fried rice and chow mein and stuff. It wasn't great, but it was cheap, and the drinks were strong, and that right there, cheap food, strong drinks. That was you know, pretty much. I'm like, I'm in. I'm gonna do it. So anyway, so we're going along here, and I'm like, I started to get really intrigued, and I started. I amassed a very small collection of tiki mugs. I mean, literally, probably like at that time a dozen, because like I said, I was so picky, and I could be, because it was like, no. Oh, that one's nice, you know. And now I think about ones that I passed up that were, it's like, I don't know, that one's some weird upside down severed head, you know, and now that's worth $10,000. But at the time, it was just kind of like, I would just pick that, it was like the cream of the crop, you know. And so anyway, so the people, like I said, people were asking me, like, hey, can you make me a necklace? And carving them one at a time became a little bit daunting. And so it was probably around 92-ish, I learned that I could make a mold and cast them in resin. And so I started doing that, and it became literally, again, it became well, hey, can you make one for me? Can you make one for my friend? Hey, how much would you charge me to do it? And so I was like, well, hey, you know, what I'll do is I'll make some designs, and I'll take a picture and I'll Xerox it, and then, you know, I'll sell them to people. And that was, so literally, that was the birth of pre-Tiki King. Because shortly after that, when it became where I was starting to realize, I'm like, you know, people want this stuff. This is weird, because literally no one wanted it. It was in the Goodwill, you know, it was in thrift shops. And it's like, nobody wanted tiki stuff. But all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, my friends want them, and their friends want them. What if I made tiki stuff, like, as a business, you know? And so this idea was formed that I would make tiki stuff and call the business Tiki King, which was a joke. It was like, you know, Burger King, or like, you know, it was like, but I was like, well, it'll be Tiki King, and it'll be everything tiki, and I'll sell tiki stuff, you know. And so I mentioned that to another friend, and I was kind of just kidding, but I'm like, oh yeah, a big catalog full of tiki stuff. Yeah, you know, like, I want to make everything. You know? And they're like, really cool. Can I get a copy of the catalog? And I was like, so I thought, well, I should probably make a catalog. So I did. And the very first Tiki King catalog was 3 Xeroxed pages, you know, stapled together. And it was, I think everything was, at that time, $6. You know, it was like keychains, necklaces, whatever, that's $6, you know. And so then along with that, I decided, well, wait a minute, we should have a big party and like tell people about it. So 1993, the first Tiki King luau, the big day before Labor Day luau happened in 1993. And And it was, it was small, but it was a big success, and we had a great time, and it was mostly all just friends and stuff, and we drank lots of rum drinks and barbecued stuff, and had ourselves a good old time. And so then after that, then I was like, well, wait a minute, so I have this thing. Maybe I should actually make like a catalog, like an actual catalog, and I did. So we started photographing all these products, and I thought, well, I don't really have enough products to fill a catalog. I got to make more products. So I did. I started making a bunch of different keychains and necklaces and wall hangings and stuff. And then in 1994, I believe, was when Tiki King became an actual business. That's why if you look at a lot of my advertising says since 1994. It actually goes back before that. But 1994 is actually the first, I believe, documented instance of Tiki King as my business. So 1994, it's where it started. That was where the whole thing like gelled. And shortly after that, so then 95, I ended up moving to Santa Cruz, California. And I believe also in 1995 was when Tiki King first went on the internet. And it was on AOL. Back then there was, if you had an AOL account, this was sort of before, internet domain names and all that stuff was still in their infancy, and nobody really knew how to deal with that particularly. Some did. I'm not saying nobody, but the average person, it wasn't like, hey, I know, I'll just get a domain. And, which, strangely enough, I did at that time. I got the domain tikiking.com, but I didn't know what to do with it because I'm like, well, okay, what do you do with it? Someone's like, well, you have to have a server. You got to have a website. You got to have all the stuff. And I was like, I don't know. And Kurt, happy birthday, Kurt! A couple days ago. Yesterday. Day before. Whatever it was. Happy birthday nonetheless. So my friend Kurt said, hey, we have an AOL account. We can set you up with a website on AOL. And so they did. And they put all my stuff up online, like I said. And I believe that was 1995. First. Back then, if you looked up Tiki on the internet, I believe the number one hit was Tiki the dog. And there was Tiki the dog's website. But there was really no like actual anything Tiki. It was like, there was just nothing. But I believe probably around that time, I think Tiki News started. They started getting their web presence, started building. But I didn't know about that yet because I also didn't have any. I knew nothing about computers really. I was just starting to get into how doing photos and stuff worked on the computer, and so about that time. So once again, I was still having the luau's, and at one of my luau's, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I work at this place, and you should." Sell our stuff there, or sell your stuff there. And I was like, what? And she said, but there's also another place called Tiki Town. You should check them out. And I was like, Tiki Town? And I did check them out, and I ended up going down there. It was in Berkeley. And it was, as far as, so Tiki Town was a thrift store that did mostly, it was, I don't know, Tiki stuff. It was mostly vintage clothing and stuff, but they had they had mugs, and they had, whatever they could get. One of the things they could not get was Tiki merchandise. So I contracted with them to make their Tiki necklaces, which I forgot to bring one down. I have the original wood carving that I did, which was based on their business card. They had Tiki Town and a business called Sharks, which was a surf place. This was both in Berkeley. But anyways, yeah, so I did their necklaces for them, and they were this sort of stylized coup tiki. And dealing with her, she said, her name was Suzanne, if memory serves. She once said, well, so obviously Otto. And I said, no, I don't know what that means. And she said, you don't know Otto? And I said, no. She's like, I thought you were, Tiki. Are you into Tiki stuff? And I was like, well, yeah, but literally, like I said, I lived in the mountains. I didn't have internet. There was like, I didn't. So she said, "Oh well, let me give you his contact information." So she did, and that was how I first met Otto von Stroheim, who at that time ran a publication called the Tiki News, which was, as far as I know, the very first Tiki fanzine ever to exist. So I hooked up and said, "Hey, I'm a Tiki artist. Here, I can send you a catalog." And I sent him a catalog, and he was like, "Whoa, I had no idea that anyone was doing this kind of stuff." Because, like I said, back then nobody was really making like necklaces and stuff and keychains and the stuff that I was doing. There were other people who were doing some like bigger carvings and stuff, but so I ended up meeting Otto, and he started coming to my luau's, and he was there. Let's see. I'm getting ahead of myself. So actually, I ended up going to. He invited me down to a big show that he did called Exoticon, which was down in Los Angeles. And it was it was at the Palace Hotel, I believe. And it was this just big thing. And Corla Pandit was there playing the organ. For all you Corla Pandit fans. He was mysterious. But he was there, and there was like all sorts of vendors selling all kinds of stuff. That was where I met Sven. Sven was there. He was doing a slideshow of urban archaeology and all the tiki stuff that they had been investigating, because that, once again, it was like you had to go out and look for stuff. There was no way of like looking it up. You had to literally this was back in, this would have been 94, 95, 97. I don't recall exactly. Maybe as late as 96. I think it was 95. I forgot to write it down in my notes, sadly. Around that area. It was around then. It was back then when you couldn't look up the date. It was before dates. We're going to say it was before calendars. It was back before the Gregorians came in and messed everything up. Anyway, so he did this show called Exoticon, and we went to that, and it was an amazing thing, because here was literally, I really don't know, but thousands of tiki aficionados all in one place, and it was just like mind blowing, because I brought like 2 catalogs, thinking who's going to be at this thing, and but I was wearing a bunch of necklaces and ended up trading with different people for stuff. I still have somewhere I traded Otto, I think, for some necklaces and keychains for a watch that says "It's Tiki Time," and I still have that. It's one of those, it's a relic. It's a relic of days gone by. So that might have been 90. It was like 95, I'd say, because 96 was when the first, so 96, Luau 96, I decided on a couple of things. There was a couple of things that I decided on. One was, this started in 95, but I decided for Luau 96, I thought, it'd be really cool. I had 2 things. I thought, it'd be really cool. One was, if I had a fez that said Tiki King, that'd be really cool, And the other was, I said, and what would be even cooler is if I had ceramic mugs that said Tiki King Luau 96. Because imagine, at that time I was like, there are no mugs other than bar mugs that maybe you'll find at Goodwill, maybe you won't, who knows? There was and I thought, imagine if I could have tiki mugs from my own luau, And it was one of those things where it was like, well, okay, why not? I'll do it. Why not? And I did, and unfortunately, those first mugs were fraught with problems. I learned a lot about ceramics and how it all works, just based on the multitude of failures that came along with trying to get those mugs produced. But they did get produced, and they debuted in 1996, the very first Tiki King Luau 96 tiki mugs. There was 2 designs, and there's the people who actually have those they're like, I'm surprised they're like, that's like one of my prized possessions is that, that 96 mug. But yeah, so it was like, so there was that, and then it was like, it became, like I said, Otto was there, and he was like, well, maybe we should do a feature on you in the Tiki News. And I was like, well, that'd be great, And he's like, we're kind of booked up for the next few issues, but we'll get to it. And I was like, great. And so he became a regular at the Tiki King luau. 97, Dionysus Demolition Derby. That was the first event that I vended at. I don't remember. It was somewhere down. In Hollywood. I don't remember exactly where, but it was in a big warehouse, and there was a bunch of bands, and there was a bunch of vendors, and there was food, and it was all kinds of just craziness. But that was where I first met King Ukulele. Was actually at the Dionysus Demolition Derby, which was like I said, 1997. And he was. I had heard of him, but he proved to be the same amount of character that he is now. He was a character then. He's still a character today. But he said, I remember him coming up, and he said, "What makes you king?" And I said, "I don't know. What makes you king?" And he said, "I was called king by a king." And I said, "So you are a king?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "So if you call me king, then I'm king." And he said, "I suppose you are then king." And I said, "Then we're both kings by our own providence." And he was like, "Good enough for me." When it was, I don't even know if he remembers that exchange, but it was this very like weird thing. But yeah, so that was the first event I actually vended at, selling my tiki wares at the Tiki King booth, which at that time was basically a little thatched hut roof that clamped onto whatever table you happened to give me at the time. Yeah, so then, it's like I started getting myself just so immersed in the whole thing, because actually right about then was when the internet actually started sort of becoming a thing. And there was like there were little hints and things there. The Tiki News website started, which had links. So there was like, oh, wait, there's other things, I started meeting other tiki vendors. At the time, I hadn't met a whole lot of other artists, but I met people who dealt in like a vintage and reproduction tiki stuff, like mugs and that sort of thing. So my mug collecting, of course, was going into overdrive, because then I was like buying anything that it like go to the Goodwill. No, everything, all of it, all the mugs, buy them, But also, so then let's go to about 1998. One of the things that used to happen a lot is that people would always say, "Tiki King, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Do you play ukulele?" And I was like, "No, I don't." And I decided, okay, this does not fly. If someone says, "Tiki King, huh? You play the ukulele?" I should go, "Yes, I do," and be able to whip it out and play a song. And so I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to get a ukulele. I'm going to learn to play a song. And so I was at a Hawaiian shirt shop, and I was like, hey, look, they have ukuleles. They're only $12, So I bought one, and it was so awful. It was like you could not play it. It was just terrible. Well, maybe had I known enough if I knew what I knew now, I probably could have played it. But it was just like, it was just terrible. But I became very interested in it, and so I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna add this to my whole thing. And I started. That was when 98 was when I got into ukuleles, and I was like, back then. Well, again, it was kind of hard to find decent new ones. I bought a lot of vintage ones. But so that started another thing in the background of the Tiki King sort of thing. But then, sometime around, I'm trying to think of when, I might be getting ahead of myself. I'm thinking, I think it was slightly after the Dionysus Demolition, so slightly after 97, so probably between 97 and 98, I made my first tikis for other people, which was for the Tiki News. I made the first official Tiki News mascot tiki that was a necklace, and Otto sold those through his through the Tiki News. And then a little later on, I ended up Baby Doe von Stroheim, Otto's wife. She was in a dance troupe called the Devilettes, and I ended up making their signature devil tikis, which once again was another one of those, like, those were my first, like, big orders. First big, I mean, I was doing consignment stuff at different shops. Like I said, Tiki Town. Other than the necklaces I made for them specifically, they also were buying stuff of the just my general keychains and necklaces. And I had a couple of other thrift stores that decided to add my stuff to their line. So it's like it blossomed, and it amazed me, just like the people that I ended up meeting. So I'll name drop a little bit. So back in the old days, in the beginnings of the internet, there was a website called Holden's Bachelor Pad. Holden's Bachelor Pad, that sold all sorts of tiki stuff and sort of mid-century stuff and just cool retro things. And that was run by a guy named Holden, who then later on went on to open Tiki Farm. But in the meantime, he was we talked about some stuff, but he used to sell my necklaces and keychains and my wares through his site Holden's Bachelor Pad before it became Tiki Farm down the line. So then also, like I said, so the ukulele thing, I taught myself to play. I decided that I wanted to combine the two things. I started doing art ukuleles. The first couple ones that I did ended up as trophies at my luau's, which we talked about that on the episode at Chad's house. He has one of my original trophy ukuleles that I did. I became very intrigued, and like I said, at the time couldn't really afford a whole lot. And so I decided to build ukuleles because I thought, or build a ukulele. I thought, I can't afford a good one, but I could probably build one. I had a wood shop because I grew up in a wood shop and my house had one, and I was like, well, how hard could it be? Turned out it was pretty difficult, but I did it anyway, and it turned out really good. I still have it. It's hanging out in the front room out there, and it still plays, and it still plays in tune. And it was the more people I showed it to, they're like, wow, how many have you built? And I was like, well, that one. But so I guess it was around 2000, I combined the two loves, so then at one point I was, like I said, there was the internet came about, and I ended up working for a company that would put music on the internet. But so I spent a lot of time on the internet, and one of the things I found was a company called Magic Fluke, and they sold ukuleles. They were weird though. They were these weird ukuleles, not just because they were shaped strange, but because they had like patterns on them. And one of the things they had was leopard. They had this leopard ukulele. I was like, whoa, leopard, And it was $200, which was like, whoa, that's a lot of money. Actually, I think it was $198 or something. But that was like, if I could just get this, that would be the key. And I did, and I ended up buying that, and that really was actually probably what really kicked my ukulele interest and career into overdrive, because I loved it so much and it played so well, and it just was just this awesome thing. But again, I decided to combine the two, and ended up making a deal with the company later on. Actually, I asked them, and they said no, and I asked them again, and they said no, and I asked them again, and they said no, and this went on for quite a while until finally they said, look, tell you what, we're going to send you some tops. Why don't you paint them, and as long as you buy them, we'll make them for you. I was like, fair enough. So they did, and I painted the first one, and took a picture of it, before I sent it to them to be built for me. But before it even got built, I put it on my website just saying, "Hey, Tiki ukuleles," and it sold immediately. It was like, "I don't care how much it is, consider it sold." And I was like, well, it's not quite actually ready yet, but I'll be sending it to you shortly." And so that one sold, and the next two sold, because they told me at the time, they're like, "As long as you buy 3, we'll let you do it." And I was like, "Oh, okay," And so I contacted them and said, "Hey, so those 3 already sold. Can you send me some more tops?" And they were like, "I guess." And so they did, and those 3 sold before I even. It's like, and this went on literally up until number 29 was the first one I actually got to keep, which was of the Tiki ukuleles, which is the one I still have. It's the one I play it in the Wake Tinkers sometimes. But it was 20. I made 29 of them before I actually saw one in my actual in the flesh, because every one of them got sold before I even got them. They just out the door. So I ended up, I ended up doing 28 designs for Magic Flute Company, and they were some of their most popular designs. We did multiple versions of some. We did one for Bette Midler, which she used in her Showgirl Must Go On tour. She had some of my designs redone in Swarovski crystals, which was crazy. I was in Vegas and went to her shop and got to see some of my tiki designs all in Swarovski crystals, which was quite a thing. They were, thousands and thousands of dollars more than I charged for them. But mine weren't Swarovski crystals and were not played by Bette Midler, so, But anyway, so about that same time, there started to be this other thing. Otto actually started doing a little party out in Palm Springs. There was a Tiki Caliente, because it was really hot out there. And I never actually made it to one of those. But in 2006, Tiki, I think it was like 2002 or 3 that it actually changed their name, became Tiki Oasis, because the first one was Seek the Oasis at Tiki Caliente, but 2006 was the first one that I went to, which was in San Diego at the Hanalei Hotel, which was later became the Crowne Plaza, but at the time was this just amazing, just tiki-filled hotel. And they had a bar that was, had sushi and tiki drinks in mugs, tiki mugs, and they had the islands, the restaurant that had lava rock walls and clam shells with waterfalls and all this crazy stuff, which I had not seen anything like that since. So the last place that was that extravagant, I think, that I went to, was probably the Kahiki. The last night, so I went to in I think that was around 2000, 2001. I can't remember exactly. I didn't write it down. The Kahiki Supper Club in Ohio was closing down, and Otto threw a huge party there, and a bunch of us all went. But it was another one of those places where, in the bathrooms, the sinks were clamshells, and it was everything, everywhere you looked was more crazy tiki artifact stuff. So the Islands restaurant was a lot like that, and it unfortunately they decided it was not their thing and tore it all out and painted the walls white. But I got to eat there a couple of times, and we, it was a good time. And back then, of course, there was always the Bahuka, which another tiki bar that bit the dust, but that was another good place to go to. If you ever want to taste the Bahuka, watch Fear and Loathing, the movie. Watch Fear and Loathing. The second bar that they're at is the Bahuka, and Hunter is sitting at the bar, and I sat actually at that bar many times. There's a fish tank. The bar is like a fish tank, and it's actually made phone calls from that same phone that they're on. But so so then we had our last luau in 2003, and then 2006 I was well into Tiki Oasis and started doing that. But I mean, in the meantime, there was all kinds of weird stuff that happened. My ukulele career, at one point, I actually did. So back in the early days of the internet, websites used to load. I don't know if who knows? Does anyone remember that websites loading? But Whalers Rum paid me to do their music, their ukulele music, while their website loaded. So, but anyway. Yeah, so and so Tiki Oasis, yeah, that was like a big, a fun thing because, like I said, with Otto, you know, he had been to my luau's and he said, hey, you know, I love the trophies because I used to do. There was contests at my luau's, the limbo contest, barbecued pig contest, best dressed. There was like all sorts of just little things that I do, and I would make trophies every year. Like I said, one of the first ones was the ukulele that Chad has. So I would make these weird trophies, and originally I would go to Goodwill or whatever and just buy some huge trophy for, you know, skiing or bowling or whatever, and then I would rework it. You know, I would change the you know, the gold poles into bamboo, and instead of the guy holding a bowling ball, he'd be holding a skull. You know, and it's like so I would make these trophies, and then Otto contacted me and he said, hey, what if you made trophies for Tiki Oasis? And I was like, okay, why not? You know, and so I did. And the first, so actually that was so 2006 was the first one I went to. 2007, I made the trophies for it. That was the first year I vended, and I've been doing it ever since. We actually just had, wow, how many is that? How many now years? 15 years. 15 years of trophies, which if you go to tikiking.com, you can see all that stuff in the art section. Yeah, so that was that. And so I do now the trophies for Tiki Oasis. Miss Tiki Oasis, who goes out and is an ambassador of all things Tiki. It's actually now it's MX Tiki Oasis, because last year was our very first year that we had a Mr. Tiki Oasis. Yeah. And but they go out and they do their thing and they show off their trophies, and if you ever see them with their trophy, guess what? I made it. Yeah, you know, which that and $8 will get you a drink. You know. But yeah, so you know, it's been a wild ride. We've had a lot of fun with, you know, like the show. This show then came about now 5 years ago. It was on a whim, wasn't supposed to go anywhere, but we're still doing it. We've met a lot of great people. We have our one semi-official sponsor, the Boozeketeer, down in Salt Lake City at 315 East Broadway. Go down, check them out. Tell Ivy Tiki King sent you. You know, it's like we've gotten to do a lot of great things. We've actually met some great people very recently here in Utah. The Utah Tiki Ohana. We got to go last weekend to the Cannibal Cove bar. Of a home bar that was just fantastic, and they made some great drinks, and we had some great company, and talked to some people, and it was good. Which one of the things that one of our recent things that we're very excited about that has been taking place over the last, I guess it's been a year now. Wild About Mary Blair, which is a company that makes apparel, shirts and dresses and whatnot. And they're licensed by the Mary Blair estate they do a lot of different Mary Blair designs. But they saw some of my work, and so we've been working together. And they most recently put out, which I showed on one of my last shows, we call it Mary's World. It's a geometric patterns reminiscent of Small World. But they're making shirts and shorts and dresses and towels and all kinds of stuff. And there's some other things coming down the pipe, which we are super excited about. But yeah, if you, once again, so if this is your first time saying, Tiki King, what's this all about? Go to tikiking.com. There is more information there than you could ever wade through. Trust me. There are people who are like, I'm just going to look for one thing, and I'm there for hours. Because on my website, there's on tikiking.com, there's a whole bunch of just history and databases and all kinds of just stuff, art showcases and all sorts of different stuff. If you go to what's our sales website? .net. TikiKing.net. You can buy a bunch of stuff because you should go out and buy a bunch of stuff. And if you want to know a little bit, I don't know if I covered it all or not, but if you go to Wikipedia, look up Tiki King. I'm on there. There's a little bit about me and what I do because there's actually way more stuff. I'm guessing we're probably over time by now, even though I've been talking fast. That sounds really just presumptuous. There's more about me than I can possibly talk about myself. No, but it has been such a wild ride, and there's just been so much minutia and so many weird little things that have happened along the way. Check it out. Go to Wikipedia, go to tikiking.com, go to tikiking.net, go to anything, go to all the places. Why not? Go there. But don't forget to return here most every Tuesday night around 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for the Cocktales of Tiki King program, episode who knows what. But who cares? We're just going to keep on going. So there you go. Thanks, Boozeketeers. I'm Tiki King. Good night and good drinking.